Hi, this is Bifflecup with the Triheart podcast. This is episode 17 with artist and journalist for Uprise, Rhode Island, Will James, with featured music by Breakbeat Heartbeat. Yeah, so I guess kind of the meat of the art of the podcast piece would be the Breonna Taylor events that you covered, but just to build a foundation, I'll just start with an easy one. Tell us a bit about yourself in Uprise, Rhode Island.
So Uprise, Rhode Island is something that I've been following since I was in college 2 years ago. It is really mostly just Steve Ahlquist, but over time it's grown to include a lot of editorials and other young journalists like Julia Rock who contribute. But I was really inspired by him because I was going to leave my journalism program because I was really disappointed with what I was seeing in corporate news. I think during Standing Rock, I was kind of unhappy with the amount of coverage it was getting, which was not a lot. And so that was actually the point where I was like, wow, I'm so done. But I was starting to see local Native American people from Rhode Island live streaming in North Dakota, and that was the only way I was seeing things. So I think that was one of the first instances where I had seen live streaming. And then fast forward a few years, and we're here, and I'm seeing Unicorn Riot doing all these amazing things in Minneapolis. And one day, as a joke, I was kind of like, oh, you know what? I should just become Unicorn Riot to my friend Jackson, who was there with me on the first live stream on June 5th. And we were kind of just like laughing. But then like a couple days later, we were like, this giant protest is coming up. Why don't we actually just go there and live stream it? And then I messaged Steve and I was like, just give me moderator access to the Facebook and I'll just live stream for you. And he was like, sure. So we literally just did that. We just decided one day to just show up and just start.
Wow.
Just, no one's paying us really. Well, we didn't plan to get paid, but we actually got offered later because
I think
he got a lot of donations and deserves some of it. Yeah, we were planning to just volunteer, obviously, because we were doing our own thing. But he was like, oh, yeah, we got donations.
That's amazing. And it's good to hear that you're compensated for the work that you do.
Absolutely, yeah. I get I'm mostly for labor, I guess I directly volunteer and then I have freelance stuff that I pay my bills with. But I do receive, they give me like free Adobe Suite, which is nice because that's actually a lot a month.
Oh, hey,
so that's cool. And then they pay for like equipment and stuff. Like if I need like a new portable charger or whatever, they'll buy it.
Let me do like a little bit of a biopic on you. So on your website, like I see a lot of arts. So I guess tell me about the arts you're involved in, and tell me about, I guess, like your art side, your journalism side, and then where those two kind of meet.
That's something that I still talk about even today when I was talking with my friends who were about to go leave to New York to try to sell art. And I was kind of sad that I wasn't going with them. So yeah, I feel like my main thing is I'm an artist. I feel like I'm kind of doing journalism on the side, but at the same time, that's actually probably the only way I'm going to make money. So like, I don't know. Yeah. So my dream job is to be an artist, like sell my photos. I kind of do a lot of, I suppose it's documentary. I take a lot of photos of punks in Providence, who are also my friends, but I try to be more abstract with it. I don't know if these words make sense to people who are listening, but that's what my art is. You'll have to look at it, I guess. And I think the way that it connects with journalism is that I want to be around things that are, somewhat improving society in some way. And, I'd like to think that the people I've chosen to become friends with, who I've actually met in the past few years, these are new friends that together, through art at least, we're going to be like making things that people care about and hopefully affect social change in some way. Right. And then at the same time, my journalism is also doing that. So for a long time, these two have been separate. My friends are so happy for me that I'm doing these live streams to get like hundreds of thousands of views sometimes. But I feel like the way I'm trying to connect it now is I'm trying to start doing video art. I posted like a teaser on my personal Instagram the other day where it's not like a now this style video. It's kind of like more abstract. Like there's kind of just like words going out there and like things happening. So it's like you kind of understand that these are like real events, but the way it's being put together is kind of more abstract.
Right.
Maybe a little bit more unprofessional at the same time. So that would be labeled an editorial. Obviously, I'm not going to pass it off as news.
Okay, so let's say I'm a regular Rhode Island Joe. Okay, so let's say that I like CNN and I like Fox and I like MSNBC. So what do you think I'm understanding about the world if I'm digesting these news outlets? And do you think I'm missing something if I'm not paying attention to Uprise Rhode Island?
I do. And see, it's hard because I don't watch local news anymore, like the television, even though I grew up on that. Obviously, like I've lived here my whole life and I grew up on these things. So it's hard for me to know what they're not doing anymore because I've just completely given up on them. But the thing that I'm always disappointed with is when I look at a story by a corporate news entity, which could be like the local CBS affiliate or local Fox affiliate or local whatever, like ABC6, Channel 7, Channel 6. It's often I feel like the stories are kind of biased towards people who hold power, such as landlords, bosses, and things like that. And with Uprise, which is what I've always admired about it, is they're at least like attempting to like represent people who work at places and unions and things like that. So that's one thing I've noticed, and I kind of feel like should be the norm. So that's like one way that I think that the coverage that they do provide could change, or what I like seeing in Uprise. But then there's also like the really easy part, which is when they just don't show up to things.
Right.
Like the other day when there was the highway protest, the Breonna Taylor protest, where people were pepper sprayed on the highway, people entered the highway. I was the only journalist with video on the highway. The cameras just stopped. I don't know why. They just gave up and just stayed on the ground. Like,
right.
What?
Right.
It was strange. And that we were told, and Steve put this in an article, so I think I'm allowed to talk about it. They were told that journalists at WPRI 12 and I think maybe something else were told that they could be fired if they entered the highway.
Wow.
So I don't know. It wasn't specific. I don't know if their boss said that or like someone hired at like the company that owns them, because they're owned by Nexstar, I think, which is based in Houston or something. So I don't know what that situation is. They were just given a very vague explanation, but that seems like not okay. Like not doing journalism for some unexplained reason.
Right.
Like that seems pretty clear to me. That keeps happening over and over again. Like on the June 5th protest, when me and Jackson were marching around with everyone on the east side, breaking curfew. No one else was even there. They showed up at the end. Like, so this is the easy part where you just show up and then we're the only ones there. So
that's crazy. Yeah.
So those are the two things. It's that I feel like the things that they do provide is often biased towards people in power, and then other time is they often just don't show up to things.
It's such a contrast seeing Uprise Rhode Island, and then it's so like ridiculous because one of my other favorite kind of outlets right now, it's not even a news outlet. It's I don't know if you heard of it. It's All Gas and No Breaks.
Yeah, I was watching that last night.
I feel like even though it started off as like a Tim and Eric comedy piece, it's become more informative than.
I do agree. Because I had seen clips and they're always very comedic. And so I was expecting that when I watched the full episode, but I was like, this is kind of like professional, actually. Like,
right.
It seems like not that. We were watching like the one where he goes to the sex convention and then the alien one.
Yes,
like, these are like actually, and the throughout the mask rally. I was like, these are all like pretty. He does egg them on a little bit. Like, obviously, you can tell like nodding a little more than maybe a journalist should. But besides that, I was like, yeah, like this is. I feel like I would do this maybe. I feel like I kind of doing it sometimes.
Yeah, it really does seem like how you said it. Like showing up is kind of the real difference.
I think that it's interesting with him that you could describe that as entertainment,
right?
But again, that we're having this discussion about how professional it is. It's almost hard. Not that it's hard to tell. I don't know. I feel like maybe that's the future. Just not maybe things being entertainment, but things not being boring. Like it's not acceptable to put out this like copy paste like story on that every cable news story sounds like it's just the same. It's literally the tone of voice sometimes. That's another thing. Media. Oh, that's another thing too. When we talk about the way that news is presented, it's the medium. So now this has these really interesting text graphic stories, a text on screen, which is what inspired me to start making this for Uprise. But when I see like local news, cable news, really no one is making those. Like, why am I the only person in Rhode Island and I'm working for free making these types of videos? It's crazy.
Right.
There's no one else doing it. Like, people have full-time jobs and I'm volunteering and no one's making these videos. Like, what?
Right. I feel like even I'm just like doing this podcast. I started with like when COVID started, and like I'm like a stupid genre of music. I like have a band and I started this podcast for like an extra arm, and like I've found stories that like people are not covering, and I'm like, I don't know, to me it says a lot that like I'm hearing these incredible stories that I don't know what I'm saying. It's just kind of like a more of a telling of how.
I'll finish it. I want to hear the rest of the time.
Well, for example, like there was this here in Boston. I'm in Boston, so in Harvard Square there were like these sex educators who were going on strike from like a store called Good Vibrations, and like it was super interesting, and they won the strike. Like,
oh, that's great. Wow.
That's cool. And it was just like, I guess, I don't know, like the strikers, they were mostly minorities. They were people of color. They were like trans. I don't know if it like people got scared away because they were sex workers, but it was just like, or sex educators rather. Like, I don't know. I just thought it was a really interesting story and nobody was covering it. And so like I like hit them up and I was like, hey, will you be on my podcast? And they were like, sure. So I don't know.
I'll have to take a look at it.
Moving forward with like your style. So this was something you retweeted from Fang Collective on June 6th.
Right.
So yeah. Fang Collective writes, huge shout out to Uprise Rhode Island for live streaming in a respectful and honest way. Steve and the team there are great people and great journalists. So what do you think this person means when they're talking about covering events fairly and honestly?
I thought about that a little bit, actually. I was just retweeting a lot of the nice comments, but one of the things about, and this is only things that like Steve has mentioned in passing about his experience working with these older activist groups like Fang, which is, I guess it's not old, but it's been around a lot longer than like the ones that have popped up because of the recent BLM protests. And he just mentioned that could be seen as an honor because that group is often very guarded. They're the holder of the bail fund for Rhode Island. I don't know if you know that. They're the person who they facilitate the bail fund for the state. So they are often targeted because of that. Police and FBI have shown up at people's doorsteps.
Wow.
For unexplained reasons. Yes, and we published, we spread that was happening when it happened earlier this summer. But yeah, so I think that was an honor getting just any compliment from them because they have to be somewhat guarded because they are being targeted for their activism.
Right.
But I think maybe what they meant by that is the kind of comments that we make, maybe while we're marching, or the things we point at. I think because that was the June 5th one. So that was when people were like cheering from the windows, which was kind of crazy on the west side. It's like maybe showing that and not being so boring and just like keeping it right focused on the crowd and just repeatedly describing what direction they're going in, maybe the context that I brought in. I suppose I'd have to ask to find out specifically, but Yeah, I guess it would just be that, like, giving like a full picture of what was happening there, the amount of support they were getting on the side that maybe some people who are critical of us would say is favoring the protesters. I do have to be mindful of that balance. I am a journalist. I chose to be a journalist. I'm not an activist. If I wanted to do that, I would do it. And, I do have to think about whether or not I'm being biased a lot, because
Right.
it's often difficult to form these relationships with activists, whether it's a public one for an article or like background or just like secret information on the side or something, and not care about whether people are going to be harmed. These are people in my community. So I guess they felt that I did a good job there. Hopefully I wasn't biased in any way.
I have like my own biases. So like I consider myself like a progressive. So when I look at Uprise Rhode Island, I assume that like it's a progressive media outlet, but then the text and like is so neutral. It's so like I feel like it's so neutral and unbiased that I realized, oh, I'm just like putting my own spin onto whatever
Really,
like
to be honest, like we're trying to be neutral. Like we're really trying to do the journalism in the way that people usually get journalism. But we're being honest. It's a progressive news site in the bio of every page we have, like on social media, on the website, on Patreon. And I think what we mean by that is, and I have to confirm with Steve because I'm really explaining myself, but I think what we really mean by that is like the choice of topics. So like we often focus on stories about labor. It's not that like we pick a side in every story. It's that, it's not that we pick the progressive side. It's that we pick stories like labor that appeal to progressives. I think that's what I would describe. So I'm glad that you like that.
So if we were following this like 2020 narrative where it's BLM versus the police, like would you do like if the police invited you on to like an event with them and you got to like report like their side, because it seems often you're on like the protesters' physical side. Yeah, would you would you accept that gig?
So Steve often works with the higher level or not works with them, but like he engages with them. Like I think he had an exchange with the Attorney General a few weeks ago regarding, not a few weeks ago, a few months ago regarding the riots when that officer tried to run people over. So Steve often does engage with higher level law enforcement.
Wow.
Like, the Attorney General is technically law enforcement, but I guess, or maybe not. But and then also like the talks. Well, he doesn't really talk to the police chief. He's had exchanges in public where he was also in the same place. But I think that the specific question you asked, I don't know. I guess we'd have to see. But I think the reason why we would not immediately say yes is because we're trying to be more critical of verifying what police say and not just immediately taking it as fact. That's one thing that, right. So like when police officers say things, like there have been many instances over a long period of time where they say things that are not necessarily true or are misleading. And so it's a journalist's job, or we at Uprise think that, and other contributors like Julia also agree with that we should be making significant efforts to see if that statement is true before just blasting it out. And I think that's one criticism again that we would have of corporate news, is that they often will just put out a police statement without any context or critique, and that leads people to believe that it is fact.
Right.
Why we might be leaning towards no, if there was like some sort of police conference or something they wanted us to.
you had mentioned Steve, so I wanted to ask you, so tell us a little bit about Steve Alquist and your relationship with Steve Alquist.
So I think I mentioned earlier that like I had been watching from afar, or I actually never really finished that thought because I started going on a tangent about Standing Rock. But Steve and Uprise RI and all the work he's done and all the people he brought into there really inspired me to stick with journalism, at least media studies or whatever I studied, because it seemed like it was contributing to positive changes in society. And I was like, great. And so my relationship with him at first was just kind of watching and being like, this guy's so cool. Like, I love that he's like showing up at people's doors and stuff and like asking these really tough questions that I'm not seeing on like traditional news. You know, one thing that I thought was impressive was that there was like this thing with Rhode Island legislature gave $1 million to this chiropractor to do a study about something. And I didn't even know the government can just randomly give money to people, but that was first for me. And Steve went to the doctor's doorstep and was like, why are you getting $1 million? And no one else was that. Like, the guy was so shook. He was like, and no one else went to his house like that. I was like, wow, Steve's like kind of crazy. This is crazy. He's showing up, he pulled up on this guy. But it was really, it was professional. Like, you're supposed to do that when someone gets $1 million from the Rhode Island General Assembly. It's a reasonable question to be asking. Like,
right.
Why do you get this? There was so many questions about his practice that were not immediately being answered. So I'm glad that he did that. But continuing on with Steve, eventually I approached him at one of the Wyatt protests and I said, oh, do you know now this? Oh, first of all, I said, oh, I love your work and stuff. That was the first time I met him in person. But I said, you know now this, how they make those little text videos. And he said, yeah. And I was like, I'd love, I'm still in school and stuff, sure, that's cool. And so by the time the next Wyatt protest had rolled around, I waited for him to publish a video, downloaded it using like a YouTube downloader website, and then just put it together. And that was the first thing I did for him. Looking back on it, it was so like poorly put together, but it was people loved it. People liked it. It got like a reasonable amount of views based on what Uprise had for a following then, so that was good. And it's definitely grown over time, which is cool. Yeah, so that's really how my relationship with Steve started. And then over time, for a long time, it didn't change. The relationship stayed like that. Occasionally, I would contribute a Now This style video to him, and that was really the like peak of our relationship. We wouldn't really talk that much outside of it, but as soon as the BLM protest happened and I offered the live stream, we started to share more information about what's going on, which is kind of cool. So like it's helping me kind of understand the state more and create content like, I hate the word content, but create news content like that. Get more informed. Really have like this background information about activist groups and police and all this and that, politicians, all that, which isn't necessarily secret information, but just like information that you can't really put in an article. So right. It's cool. That's our relationship now. We are coworkers.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about this summer. So yeah, if the main idea of this podcast is kind of the Breonna Taylor events from the last couple of weeks. So what did you report this summer leading up to that?
So, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the first thing was the June 5th BLM protest, which showed me that people were interested in this type of live stream content. And then after that, I think I was kind of just approaching it with a just show up to everything mindset. So I don't think I had a strategic goal for anything. I was like, I'm just going to show up to every protest. But as I was doing that, I started to kind of understand the philosophy or like the reasons why people are going to the protest. Obviously by asking the questions about why you're here today and all this stuff and listening to what the activists say on the megaphone and reading what they put out in editorials, which they often put on Uprise, I started to understand more about what young people wanted and that they weren't really satisfied with like the commitments that like the Providence City Council and the mayor put out, because it seems that they believe that no action or no systemic changes have occurred. And I think that's actually a reasonable description of the state at the moment. There hasn't really been any reasonable systemic change. And that would be something like defunding, which is what people are still pushing for at this point. So when we got to the point where Breonna Taylor's verdict was announced, I think that was the boiling point, perhaps, where people were like, nothing has happened. It's really great that there's an outpouring of support, that 10,000 people showed up on June 5th, that the city is committing to being an anti-racist institution, that the mayor is investigating whether or not the police budget can be analyzed, reduced, or he's analyzing it. He hasn't committed to reducing as such. But I don't think people were satisfied with these commitments. and without any action. And then so I think that's why people were so ready to do something that escalated so drastically by entering the highway and putting themselves at risk in order to spread the message about Breonna Taylor not getting justice, and also just that they wanted things to occur in Rhode Island.
Yeah. Let me, and I might do this a few times, let me come at you with like a more right-wing angle. So, you know, Breonna Taylor, that was Louisville. You know, there are so many cases that we see across the nation, and not that Rhode Island is totally perfect, but, you know, none of these are happening in Rhode Island. So why are people showing up in Rhode Island? These cops aren't the ones that killed Breonna Taylor. Like, why is this happening here?
I think that from what I don't know if it's right for me to speak for activists, but from what I've learned and observed, I think that first it's important to recognize, and I've learned too, that there are many instances of police brutality here that we just don't know about. You know, if you look back at our live streams, at our videos, and all the protests we covered, people have many stories about being abused by the Providence police, by state police, all these instances, and recently. So I think it's important to recognize that it actually does occur. So like, it's not like we just don't hear about it. So there's that. But also it's important to recognize that it is true that there isn't like flat out murder as much as other, or at least high profile. You know, there have been some unjustified police killings in the state. And I think that what people are focusing on here in this state is, first of all, solidarity. You know, a lot of the events are named that when they announced were solidarity with Louisville, solidarity with Breonna Taylor, which is what that event was. Just showing that the nation, people in other places agree with the message of protesters in the city where something happened, and kind of just signaling that they support them. So there's that. But I also think that people understand that racial injustice is occurring here generally, and that's economics, that's the environment, you know, that's the fact that the poorest neighborhoods have the worst like environment. There's always this like pollution by the bay and stuff. And also just the fact that, you know, all of the things that have happened in this country, like slavery and Jim Crow and all these things, affect the whole country, and that includes Rhode Island. And that's the reason why there's such wealth disparities between Black and white Americans and other Americans of color. And people, I think young people especially, are very aware of that. And so when they show up to a protest for Black Lives Matter, you know, they're showing up in solidarity with Louisville and Kenosha. I think they're being driven by the idea that they want changes to occur in the state that are not only related to literally not killing Black people, it's to help uplift and empower Black people. Mm-hmm. And I think you really see that in events such as like that talk about the discussion of defunding. Like there was this event called ProFest, which was put on by some ASU 20 people.
Oh, nice.
You know, they talk about why they want to defund the police. They're like, the children in the city who are often youth of color, their arts programs are being defunded, and that's decreasing the quality of their life. That's decreasing the challenge choices and the skills that they get to learn, and that's not acceptable. So I think that the defunding discussion really shows me, and like very explicitly, like people literally say this, that we want the outcomes, the economics of Black people's lives to be better. So it's not enough to just not kill Black people. We need to correct the things that happen in this country, and those things are present here in Rhode Island.
Yeah, I also got to speak with BLM Rhode Island PAC political director, Corey Jones. And yeah, what you're saying is very reminiscent of what he was saying. It's very, I don't know if compelling is the right word, but anyway, good answer is what I'm trying to say.
That's good. I'm glad that you said that, because I was hoping that I was describing the activists correctly.
Yeah.
Because it's not even about organizations. You know, it's easy for an organization to put out a statement and say what they believe, like BLM RI PAC, they can tell you. But I feel like, especially what my job is as a journalist, is to understand what every person believes, especially the people who were never going to join an organization, who just showed up to a protest, who just showed up once on June 5th. Why did they show up then? You know, and I feel like I did a lot of interviews that day, so hopefully people can put a picture together and then trying to. But I feel like that's a good summary that I said. That people understand that there is, it's not enough to just not kill Black people, to not kill brown people, to not, you know, anything. It's, you need to make people's lives better as well.
Yeah.
Fix mistakes, and also just makes people's lives better because.
Okay, so on September 23rd, so that's when Breonna Taylor's hearings, which resulted in like essentially no actual justice for Breonna Taylor. So you have a couple articles out of Uprise documenting some of these scenes from the resulting protests. So tell us a little bit about the first protest involving the Providence Highway.
I did not expect that. I feel like I had plans that night, actually, because at this point the protests had started to become I don't want to say smaller because the size always fluctuates, but I don't think they were escalating. So I wasn't expecting anything that night. I kind of just showed up. I was like, oh, we're going to do a march, rallies. They're going to rally support and things like that. And that's what I'm going to be documenting. And then when we started marching towards the highway, I was like, oh, this is a different route. We had been here on June 5th, but usually protests have been more towards the Westminster Street area or the east side. And people literally started marching towards the highway, and I was just marching with them. And I was thinking in my head, like, my heart was racing. I was like, oh my God, they're going to enter the highway.
Oh,
I was
no.
like, I'm going to have to enter the highway too. And I was actually scared, obviously entering a highway, putting yourself at physical danger. And, that choice was made. I don't know who made the call. I don't think that protest was publicly organized. I'll have to double check. And maybe I'm just not remembering, but my heart was racing, obviously, because entering a highway is obviously dangerous. And at the same time, I was kind of shocked. I was like, I guess, impressed silently. I didn't comment on it because I don't think that's appropriate for me to make that kind of judgment, that people in this city were so willing to put themselves at risk to raise attention about this issue that they care about. What happened next, which I guess maybe isn't surprising, but I maybe thought they would have actually blocked all 3 lanes, is when they finally got on the highway. Very quickly, the state police pulled up. Even before the whole crowd was fully on the highway, the police was already next to them, blocking the 2nd lane. So I think protesters only were able to block 2 lanes before one state police officer got out and almost immediately started pepper spraying people. He was a bald officer, and he continued to kind of escalate the situation by threatening to use chemical weapons or some vague form of violence. They often got very handsy with the protesters. They were touching people, which was kind of strange. It was weird to me that police would choose to touch people. It seems like that's usually something people try to avoid. And then at that point, when protesters were pepper sprayed, a few people who attempted to reach the 3rd lane and block it, protesters began retreating towards the sides. And that's when I think a few people who were very scared started to climb over the fence. I don't know if I got the first person climbing over the fence, but there's definitely video of people climbing over the fence, including myself, because we were also forced to climb over the fence, me and Steve, and also a Providence Journal reporter who was there. So that was a bit shocking to me. A lot later, it's strange to me that there isn't a lot of discussion about the fact that protesters were forced to climb over a fence. I'm not sure if that's like a professional action for the state police to request people to take in response to danger, because the message from police has been that the reason why protesters were pepper sprayed is because they were putting themselves and others in danger, and they were trying to remove people from the highway. But I'm also questioning if taking people out of danger is valid if you made them climb over the fence. Like,
right.
We spoke to people who shared with us that they were very scraped up. There was people who were disabled who had to climb over the fence. So people were I think a few people sprained their ankles. I wanted to share their stories, but no one would agree to speak on the record because they would be put themselves at risk of arrest for going onto the highway, which is a crime. So they wouldn't speak to us. They only told us about their injuries. Yeah, that was a bit surprising to me. The whole night, I didn't expect any of that to happen. Nothing. I thought it was just going to be a march around town. And then it quickly escalated to entering the highway and then being pepper sprayed and forced to climb over a fence. So that happened very quickly.
We had talked about being unbiased, and I feel like as a journalist, you are, supposed to just be there in the present and just record and be unbiased. But, as you've been at these protests every day, if I was asking you on your biases, do you have criticisms or critiques about the protesters or the police? For example, if you were more kind of leading the protesters, maybe you'd say, oh, maybe we shouldn't be going on the highway. Or if you were more in charge of the cops, you'd say, oh, let's not pepper spray these people.
So I think in terms of pepper spraying people, I'm more inclined to just flat out say that that's not acceptable, especially during a pandemic. It was pretty clear that the coronavirus affects the lungs, and kind of spraying people with a chemical irritant that would damage people's lungs is very clearly not in line with the World Health Organization guidance. But in terms of the bias of that situation, it's also hard for me to step out. And it's important to note that even when that was happening, that protest was happening, I didn't really make any sort of comments about what was occurring. Maybe that's not true. I think when I look back at the footage, I was like, what is going on? the police are doing this and that, and the people are. So I try not to like make kind of odd. Actually, I'm going to stand by myself. I think I did a good job. I'm trying to remember exactly what I said, but I feel like I just described what was occurring. I was like, police just touched this person, police just pepper sprayed, the protesters enter the highway, and that allows people to make their own judgments if they disagree with protesters entering the highway. Okay, I'm just saying it happened. So I think in that way, I in that specific instance, I did a good job of not being biased. I showed what was happening. I said protesters tried to enter the highway. If that is a crime, you can't enter a highway if you're against that. Even if you're progressive, there it happened. I showed you it. You can talk about it. You can disagree with it. And yeah, I think in that instance, I did a good job in just describing what was happening. But it's also important to note that it's hard for me to do that when I'm also being subjected to whatever the police are ordering people to do. Like I was forced to climb over the fence as well. So like it's very difficult for me to like talk about whether or not being forced to climb over a fence is professional when I was also forced to climb over a fence, which was annoying at least, or like kind of traumatic at best. And sorry, I flipped that around wrong, but yeah. So I think that's the really important thing too, is that, you know, I'm trying really hard to just accurately describe things, but very recently I'm starting to become, I don't think targeted by police, but included in the response that police give to protests. Like the ACLU recently released a letter today, actually, really on my behalf, or not specifically my behalf, but press freedom. Because at another Breonna Taylor protest, the one where 2 people were arrested, I don't know if you saw that one. 2 people were arrested.
Yes, the most recent piece you did. Yeah.
That was night 4, I think, or night 3. That was night 3. And right after protesters were sprayed, a police officer approached me when I was standing on the sidewalk and ordered me to leave the area. And I just repeatedly told them I'm press, you know, I'm trying to do my job. And then I told them I'm going to continue doing my job. And they just continued ordering me away. And at that point, when I finally said I'm going to do my job, I could tell he was very unhappy that I would not follow his orders, which were violating my constitutional rights. And he said, if you come back this way, you're going to get arrested. So I'm pretty sure the ACLU was clear that that's violating press freedoms. Like I'm there documenting an event. I'm on a sidewalk, by the way. So it doesn't even matter if I'm a journalist. Anyone can stand on the sidewalk a reasonable distance away from something occurring and record it. So that's why the ACLU letter was general, because it's not even that I'm just a journalist. Someone standing on the sidewalk at a reasonable distance away from the protest is allowed to stand there and record police activity. Oh, but I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent again.
No, keep going.
But yeah, it's often hard for me to like remove myself from these situations when I'm becoming wrapped up in the police response, because that was pretty serious. You know, if I had been arrested or something literally doing my job, I don't even know what I would say. How do I pretend not to be biased to police when they're violating my constitutional rights, knowing very well that doing so is a violation of my constitutional rights?
Right. I would agree with you that what you're talking about did bleed into your most recent piece. It started with a discussion with you and a police officer. I believe it was you, where you were saying,
yeah. That line was like, I'm with the press, I'm with the press, and then you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think Steve wrote that, and I was credited for just doing a live stream, but.
Okay. Okay. That clarifies things. Well, I guess I would just ask you, just for context in this next segment, it didn't really seem like anything was so remarkable in this event, like going on the highway or having 100 people arrested. But so what is the context of this second event that we're about to talk about?
Yeah, the context of that event, again, it's another situation where I show up to something and I'm like, oh, this is just going to be a march to rally support throughout the city. And then it escalates into something more. And with that instance, maybe it was because I was just too far away or because I was looking through the camera. I can't really tell what happened, but there was some form of escalation between protesters and police at the end of a march in support of Breonna Taylor. Just another regular march rallying support around the West End that night. But when it got to the end of the march, when it was literally about to end, they were at the starting point again, and that's when they usually end. There was some form of escalation between protesters and police. So protesters did choose, and that's very obvious, to surround a police car. I couldn't see what actions were occurring, but at one point, a police officer finally got out of the car and started chasing after someone. So I don't know what that person did because I was on the other side of the car. And by the time I had ran around to this side, the police officer was already out of his car, or out of her car, I'm sorry. And at that point was when they just started grabbing people for something. I think, I don't know what the charge was, but the charge doesn't specify what occurred, I believe, unless I'm just ignoring something that the mainstream news, corporate news put out. Yeah, that was the context for that is just the regular march, and then some sort of escalation occurred at the end of the night where police began arresting people. And then that same Rhode Island State police officer from the highway used pepper spray or chemical weapons again.
Oh, it was the same one. Wow.
The same person. Yeah, it's a bald, tall person. I don't know if he's like a commander or something, whatever that title is, but he was the same one. And this time he had 2 cans. He was like akimbo wielding it. Like,
wow.
It I don't know if you saw the video. It's kind of crazy. And I almost got sprayed that night too. So even I was also threatened, but I was also like, I had to jump out of the way of his chemical weapon spray because he was throwing that around.
That's crazy that you would even like recognize a police officer. Like I would recognize my DARE program officer who like is in my town and walks around and stuff. I would not recognize like, just, it's so interesting to hear you say like, oh, that guy again. Like,
no, it was, I had to think about it for a second, but I saw him walking up. He came out of his car after protesters were already in 2 people. I think 1 or 2 people were already in custody. And at that point, I saw him coming from afar. So I had a chance to think about who this person would be. And I was like, oh, I think it is the same person. And as soon as he continued closer, I was like, he's the same, he's bald, like he's the same height. I was like, this is definitely the same person. And then
wow.
he lifted up his hands and let go of the 2 cans. And I was like, this is literally the same guy. I don't know if he's like the designated pepper sprayer or something, but like he let it loose. Yeah, that's the other thing too is Steve already told me, and I expect this too, is that, you know, eventually you're going to become known if you keep showing up to these things. Like most of the Providence Police Force is probably like acutely aware of who Steve Alquist is. And I'm probably getting that way with the Rhode Island State Police. But that's just not something I need to be concerned about. You know, I'm doing my job. Whatever way they react is their responsibility.
That's
if I'm going to get arrested for doing my job. It really isn't to me. I can't even just think about it. You know, it's primarily my job to get the news. I'm following the law and, you know, preserving my constitutional rights to record events. If my rights are violated, that's someone else's responsibility.
Wow.
It's also important to note that for some reason, the people who were the police officers who were monitoring that event that night were all Rhode Island State Police, even though it was entirely occurring in Providence. There was very few Providence police officers that night, and I don't know why. Because the previous one was, well, I guess the previous one was a highway protest, so maybe I have no idea where they chose. We don't know yet. Maybe we'll find out and we'll publish that. But it was very interesting to me that Providence police were not the people responding to this supposed incident that requires police monitoring. And then again, that's been pretty consistent at the other protests. The most recent one, which was night 5, which was just a march throughout the east side. That one was, again, Rhode Island State Police response. But this time they were mostly in undercover vehicles, which was interesting. It's very easy to tell what an undercover police car is when you can see the people inside and the cars are following you. They also, I feel like they all have the same beginning, which is like 3 numbers. I don't know if it's S95, but it's like the same 3 numbers. So it's pretty, they should have like tried unique license plates or something. Yeah, it's pretty easy to tell what an undercover car is. But yeah, most of the cars at the most recent one were undercover.
Are you compelled to like act? Are you compelled to be like, go to someone and be like, hey, you know, the Providence local police were supposed to be doing this, not the Rhode Island State Police, like, or are you just like not satisfied?
Well, it's hard to be, I don't even know what the response of journalists should be, because it's hard to recognize. I'm a very young person. I'm kind of figuring this shit out as I go. You know, I have guidance from Steve. I went to school, so like I read a little bit, hopefully, and I'm trying to make decisions that I think are based on what I've learned. It's professional, but with a specific thing like that, I don't know what the response should be from us. Should we be asking that question, or should we be letting other people do it and just covering their response? And I try to answer that question by watching what Steve has done and is doing, and I still don't really have an answer. Sometimes he asks a question, sometimes he doesn't. Like in the most recent one, and I think it was really because I was put in danger and threatened with arrest, he started asking the question. I don't know if he reached out to the ACLU or they were watching, but he, you know, continued to cover that sort of happening, to figure out what's going to happen and ask questions of people. I think he asked the governor recently too at a press conference for the instance. I know that activists who actually were able to get into one of her press conferences. We wrote an article about that, and they asked her questions about pepper spray and stuff. So clearly, people want answers to that. If activists are willing to go into press conferences and try to ask those questions, so I think I don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry. I'm still trying to know what you should be. No, but like I really don't know. It's like what should we just be covering, and at what point should we be investigating?
Right.
I really don't know the answer.
So moving back to like this article, so you had said that maybe Steve had written this, so it's not exactly verbatim of what happened.
I don't even know. I think I was credited because I did the live stream.
Oh, okay.
The video content. I don't think I contributed any writing. I'll have to double check, but I definitely didn't post it.
Oh, you're ruining my next question.
Am I? I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
It's funny you bring that up because people have been. There was like a few criticisms of recent articles, and they were like, adding me on whatever and being like, "Why did you write this?" And like, I literally didn't. Like, I'm just being credited for the live stream. Like, go yell at Steve or something. Like, I don't even know what article it was. I've been getting a lot of weird criticism lately too.
All right, fine. I'll skip this question. I'll skip it.
Okay. Well, what was the question going to be?
Well, it was going to be, so the beginning of the article reads a conversation between a police officer and a press who, so the press goes, "I'm with the press." And the police officer goes, "I don't care who you are. You're done. I'm with the press. You're done. Beat it. I'm with the press. I'm going to do my job. I don't care. Get out of here." So obviously, like in this exchange, a reporter wouldn't have time to like elaborate or be, prosy about what does it mean I'm with the press. So I guess like what does the press mean in this scenario where they're saying I'm with the press?
That's a good point. I think that I don't even know what instance that you're saying that because, I don't think being press gives me more rights than a protester. right? Like I can't magically do anything more than a protester is allowed to. But I thought, and I'm hoping that this is a correct assumption, that I should be excluded from like violence when I'm trying to record an event that is occurring. So like even if I am standing right there, maybe where police don't want me to be, as long as I'm like not on private property or something, or even then, because like, you know, I think about Amy Goodman, who works for Democracy Now. And she was at Standing Rock, she was arrested because her and her camera crew followed protesters onto private property owned by the Dakota Access Pipeline. She was arrested for that, and then, you know, the judge accused her of being an activist and all this and that. But, you know, the reason why I chose to, you know, identify myself as press is because regardless of where I was physically standing, and at the time I didn't even realize I was just on the sidewalk, which I'm completely allowed to be there. I just said that because I'm working, like I'm trying to record a news event that this police officer is also part of, and I don't think that the police have any right to tell me whether or not I can continue amplifying this event, which in that instance I was live streaming. I think that's really the only way I can put it. It doesn't, as long as I'm not literally participating in the protest, I don't really see why it's appropriate for someone to order me to stop doing my job. You know, I wasn't interfering in the police work. I was just standing there.
If I took the persona of right-wing me again, so if I came at you with like, oh, well, a police officer has asked you to leave, when an officer asks you to do something, like you comply, like.
Yeah, that's something I think about a lot too, just because I am a progressive person, like what that means, especially because I've been thinking about, you know, all these like police injustice for many years, just because I care about that kind of issue. And one thing that I'm always thinking about, and one thing that I understand, is that the order has to be lawful. You know, there's limits to what police can't order you to do, obviously. Like they can't order you to just randomly strip naked and like perform sexual acts with them. Like that would be rape. So like you also can't violate my constitutional rights just because you want to. So like in that instance, like I'm doing my job, I'm a member of the press, I have a right to freedom of speech and to spread this message. And I'm in and I specifically was in a place where I was not even on private property. And, you know, ordering me to vacate the premises for no clear reason, or just ordering me to leave and to stop me from doing my job, or stop me from doing journalism, from expressing my speech, is violating my constitutional right, and that's not acceptable. I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
No, that's totally it. I didn't even have a question. I just threw an opposition at you.
Yeah, I think that's what I would say is like you can't order people to give up their rights. That's not how that works.
Right. Okay, so this isn't even a question. It's just like something I think about, like, you know, when I was younger and like, oh, it was so exciting to go to a club and do drugs and, you know, have sex, and like you have a wild night and you like come home and you're like, wow, what a wild night. And like what you're talking about, like climbing over a wall, and then just like I just picture you getting home and just like, wow, what was that like?
Yeah, you know, I think that I'm in a better place. You know, and that's the thing too, is like not only am I experiencing the question of bias, like I'm thinking about whether or not I'm biased because I had to go through that experience of being forced to climb over a fence, but it's also just like other people are traumatized because they were forced to climb over a fence and were pepper sprayed. And I'm not a magical person living on a third plane just because I'm a reporter. I was also there witnessing other humans being pepper sprayed and other humans being forced to climb over a fence, and also being forced to climb over a fence. So like that is stressful. That could be traumatic. And I think it's good that nowadays, when we're not necessarily in quarantine, that I'm able to go to spaces like a friend's house or something, kind of relax with them right after these events, and not just sit alone and think about that. You know, I can just chat with someone, or like have a drink, or just relax, or do whatever. But I have to admit that on June 5th, after that night, which was not particularly violent, but it was, I suppose, stressful to have police following a mostly peaceful march for the whole night. I think it was 4 hours march. And then at one point we were kettled on Broad Street. I don't know if you watched that.
No, I think I missed that.
Yeah. Police did stop the march and partially surround protesters, or they did surround protesters.
Oh, in June. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Police did stop the march at the corner of Broad and Knight Street on the west end and kettled protesters for like 30 seconds. But people were so scared that they started climbing over the fence, and Sorry, I'm like tearing up a little bit thinking about it, but I didn't get it on video because I was so shocked. But like, I looked to my left and I just saw children like climbing over the fence,
Wow.
like, in fear of their life, and that was like a lot. We were in quarantine then, so like I just had to go home and just sit with that. Like I didn't talk to anyone about it. Like I like didn't go out for 3 days. That was like a lot, and it was just so weird because like that event was so overwhelmingly positive, but like it was so stressful and traumatic for a lot of people. I've talked to people who have participated in that event, and they feel like very similar ways. So yeah, it's I'm reporting on it. I'm not part of it. I'm not protesting as well, but I'm there.
Right.
We're all humans. Like we're all experiencing the same police response. Like I can't pretend that it doesn't affect me too.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of like events like this, and I'm just like, what is? I mean, of course, there's like the rioting and looting, narrative, if you really want to like believe that or look at that. But like, what is the thinking behind trapping protesters? As someone who's been there, if you could kind of like put yourself in the shoes of like the police, what do you think their thinking is in trying to do something like that?
See, and this is when it's like I feel like it would be biased because I'm just speculating. I have no idea. I don't have familiar. I'm not familiar with. They put out statements saying this and that. Like I don't even know what the statement was on June 5th though. Like I don't. But see, that's the thing too is what is a justification for a police to even be monitoring events? Like people are allowed to protest and be in the street. There doesn't have to be a police response, and yet there always is. So like what was the reason police were even there on June 5th? Because a riot had recently occurred and they didn't know if those people would also riot? Like maybe, I think someone mentioned that. I believe the police said that maybe, or maybe they didn't. Maybe I'm making that up. I really cannot make any specific guesses as to why police are doing what they do. I can only kind of question it and allow people to make their own decisions about relevant issues like defunding or such.
Right.
I don't ever speculate on live streams about why police are doing this and that, but the content I create by doing that live stream almost always results in people saying, why are there so many police officers there? This is a very poor use of money. And then they're telling us that they don't have enough or that they can't be defunded because they're doing essential things. And yet, and I'm speaking as a commenter, and then yet I see them, monitoring children peacefully marching. So I feel like that's what always happens. And I think that's the way that I'm not biased is, I'm really just recording like the protesters do this and that. If you disagree with them, mention the high or whatever, sure, like, okay, go off on that. I created content for you. Use that against all these protesters saying they did this bad thing. And then at the same time, you can easily look at the police and be like, why are there so many police monitoring this event that I think that people should be allowed to do? Like, I don't agree with that. That's really all I can say. I really, it's difficult for me to speculate about why police do certain things. And I think this goes back to the question you asked earlier about the balance between covering and investigating. And I don't know if I'm the person to do that yet. Yeah, I don't know if I'm I want to be like more investigative, but I don't know if that's a place yet as a volunteer. I don't know if I can commit that time to figuring out a way to kind of analyzing police responses, and that's that kind of question.
Let's like go back, I don't know, how long has it been? 6 or 7 months. Let's say coronavirus never happens and George Floyd never gets murdered. What do you think you would be doing right now?
I have no idea. I think that it's really important for me to recognize that as I'm kind of building or continuing to build my own career in my own life, that my life has gotten significantly better because I was able to cover these protests. So like that's another thing too, is like recognizing that journalists make money and support themselves off of the communities that they're in. So when we talk about bias, there's that. Like I have no idea what I would be doing. Like that June 5th protest where I just decided to show up and live stream because Unicorn Ride inspired me. That changed my life. That was the first time I got paid for journalism. That day that Steve paid us. And, since then, I think I don't know, I think it really was because of Uprise. Actually, I got hired for a grant project with the Province Public Library. We're going to be doing a project about journalism. And again, that's because I was going to these events. So to say what would I be doing, I would be significantly worse off, I think, in terms of my career. I think that I would be at a different point. I would still be starting out looking for a way to like get my first big break or something. if something happened.
Yeah, let me ask you the same question, but like kind of from a different like point of view. So, okay, in this scenario, everything's happened that's happened. We're in the real world. And let's look more to like a future. And let's say that I'm of the perspective that, oh my goodness, we just need to get Trump out of office and like everything will kind of go back to normal, and you know, these protests and this corona and blah blah blah, that'll all stop. So let's say that, even though I don't believe in what I'm saying right now, let's say that that actually does happen. What do you foresee yourself reporting on if
there's no more if there's no more giant protests and such? It's a great question. I actually think about that a lot. I think that it goes back to the answer I gave you when you were talking about what protesters are. Yeah, the answer, the words I gave you. I don't even know if you asked a question, if I just went on a tangent. But
you're so funny.
When I explained to you that I think protesters are doing this out of solidarity, but also because they recognize that there is economic and racial and economic and environmental injustice being done to Black people, specifically to poor people, whatever, like any marginalized identity. People that are protesting understand that. Regardless if Trump is put out of office and there's no more giant protests, or magically police stop literally murdering people, that doesn't solve racial wealth gaps or anything. Like, there's still going to be significant problems in society that led to this giant outburst like this. It's not just that George Floyd was murdered. It's, you know, if one specific Black person was murdered, but there was no wealth gap, there's no this, like, it would be resolved like pretty immediately and people would move on with their lives.
Right.
Yeah. Because of all of these other things and the murder, that's why there was a huge outburst of all this activity. And so even just solving that one issue, it's not going to solve all the systemic issues that led to it. So that's what I'm going to do after this. If there's no more giant protests in the winter or whatever, I'm still going to make the little Now This videos. I'll probably be doing more of that. I'll probably be making more of those like Now This style short videos.
Okay, so now I'll ask you. So like, since you're there every day, and you're seeing what's on the street, do you have predictions for like what's about to come as we enter a colder season and, you know, it's just cold?
A prediction is, see, I don't even know if the word hoping is right, because this is like bias as a progressive. I'm hoping things change positively, but I'm interested to see whether protests or activism will evolve to become more focused on building specific policy proposals or building or taking alternative direct actions, like forming unions, like that kind of thing. You know, there's this really good thing I've been monitoring called the Tenants Union, Tenant Network RI. They've been helping tenants in Rhode Island who are facing eviction, band together and with other people who own properties that their landlord owns, and say, we're all not going to pay rent.
Wow.
And people have been doing this in Rhode Island. It's amazing. And I wish this story got more attention. I probably should be writing or making videos about it. But people have been doing this, and people have been doing this all across the country. So it's part of a huge network. And so I'm wondering if activism is going to go in that direction, where it's like forming unions and other sort of like labor activities where you take back the power without getting someone elected. You just do it. And things like that. And, you know, you see, I think I see like little sprinklings and buds of it starting to bloom, because I don't know if you know where White Electric is in Providence. It's just like a little coffee shop. The employees actually formed a union, and we think it's the first coffee shop union in the state, probably ever. So yeah, and that happened. I don't think that, you know, it's not even literally related to BLM, but I don't think that would have happened if all this stuff wasn't happening, if all this energy wasn't around. So I think that people are starting to do things like that, turning to tenant networks and forming unions in their workplaces that aren't factories, that are just coffee shops and places like that, and making sure that their employees, who probably include Black people, are getting paid appropriately, not being paid like the minimum wage, which you cannot live on. So now White Electric is fundraising to own the coffee shop and make it a cooperative. So I think that in instances like the tenant network and forming a union, I think I see little buds growing of what activism could change to if there isn't literal protest anymore. And that's what I would be covering. either live streaming or just videos.
So like the last episode I just did it's this guy named Sam Epstein. He runs, I'm in Boston. I lived in Providence for a year. It was a great year, but I'm in Boston. So he runs a music venue in Somerville, and it's called the Jungle Community Club. So there's Somerville, and then Cambridge is right next to Somerville. So the mayor of Somerville is trying to be really, really tough on Corona. So he says no live music outside, obviously not inside, but no live music outside, even though this is something that's happening in Cambridge. And the mayor says no live music outside because it brings raucous crowds. And so this venue owner is telling me, he says, this is just a racist trope that like, Benny B. Good would be playing guitar, and all these, black teenagers, they'd be coming in. And actually, another interesting point he told me is that if you own a venue, you have to check off if you play hip hop there because your insurance will go up, which is super interesting.
I've heard that. Yeah,
that's so insane. But
yeah, see that's a really good example of systemic racism,
right?
And that will continue regardless of not whether Black people are literally being murdered in the street. Like those
right.
And also, this is hypothetical because Black people are going to continue being attacked until we take systemic changes. But anyway, with some like what you just said, like that's exactly what I'm referring to. Like there's all these things that people know about and people don't know about that are not okay and are contributing to wealth inequality, all this stuff. Like it's just not acceptable. It's really that's really just like redlining. Like I don't even know what the hell that is. Like musical redlining.
Yeah, exactly. And like what I think is, for me as someone who's, I don't know if reporting, or I don't know what I'm doing, but like if I'm reporting it, let's say, like, it's not so blatant like somebody strangled or chokeholded George Floyd. Like you have to like go a few steps to realize, oh shit, this really is like really messed up. And sometimes I'm wondering, like, even though I don't think it's extra, if I'm showing it, I wonder if people will perceive it as like, you're really reaching, like you're really cherry picking right now. Do you feel like there are stories that make you look extra or make you look like libtard or something like that? You know what I mean?
I'm trying to think of an example because I feel like it might be better for me to talk about the same example, but I don't think I have a specific example. I would say yes sometimes, but because I'm doing it, I know that it is correct and that I'm basing my fact and also the historical reality of the people I interviewed who say this is offensive or has made my life worse in this X or Y way. And I think the criticism I always receive is in the comments, if someone be like, oh, you're reaching or something. And most of the time we ignore the comments because it's just people who hate us because they or just literally hate me or Steve specifically. But sometimes it's people who do like our content and just don't agree with the specific thing that we're talking about. And again, like unless we're writing an editorial, we aren't saying it. Someone else is. And that's the thing too, is we try not to make things up. Like we have to wait for other people to say things and then cover it. I don't think there's really many stories where Steve or Steve mostly because he writes more, have done that, like dug up a story really to make something up, even if it's real. We usually wait for something to happen. And I think that's really the best way we can describe it is if someone is saying something is real and they want to talk about it and we give them the platform, like I think that's the only way we can present it. And if some people are going to disagree with it, then we really tried our best to give you the opportunity to learn. If you don't, then that's your own problem.
You're amazing. I don't know if I have any more questions. You are so good. Where can people find you, and what are you doing next?
I think that I've been more focused on my art lately. I'm trying, I've always been a photographer, but I started making physical clothing. Like I started putting my photos onto clothing and stuff. And
I saw that on your website.
Did you? Oh, thank you. Yeah. I actually sold my first piece of art like 2 weeks ago in New York. And it was a sweater with a picture of one of my punk friends on it. It's just like a cool image, and some girl at NYU bought it. So that was cool. And I'm just going to keep making stuff like that. And so I think that's in the short term what I'm doing. I'm focusing on art and how to sell art and go down that path. So like literally today, I just heat pressed, which is like taking an image and putting it onto clothing. That's the process. I just heat pressed a few images onto a piece of fabric that I'm going to collaborate with friends on and make like a canvas painting of sorts.
Wow.
But also just images on it. Yeah, hopefully it's interesting. And then I guess places you can find me is I share most of my art on Instagram. So since I just said art, yeah, it's at Will Cons, which is, and then I think I also am part of an art collective now, I guess as of today. We also made an Instagram for that, but there's literally nothing on it because it was made a few hours ago. But it's called the $10 Club.
Oh,
And
cool.
I guess you can follow that too. It's cool. I don't know what we're going to post yet, but yeah, it's called the $10 Club. That's the name of the collective me and my friends have formed. And the at name is 10 to 100, which hopefully we're going to change because I don't like the at name. But yeah, because it's, I don't know, but it's TEN, the number 2, and then A, and then Hunnit, which is HUNNIT. So 10 to 100, which is going to be the place for our collective, I guess. But that's what I'm doing in the short term.